Hello, everyone. By listening to this story, you will not only improve your English and your listening skills, but you will also discover a powerful life lesson. This is a story about patience, silent struggle, and the incredible things that can happen when you refuse to give up on yourself. He had no money, no support, and no hope, only one dream. The room was exactly 10 feet long and 8 feet wide. I knew this because I had measured it with my footsteps 1,000 times. There was a small bed in the corner with a thin mattress that smelled like old dust. There was a wooden desk with a shaky leg and a single window that looked out onto a brick wall. This was my world. This was the place where I would spend the next 5 years of my life. My name is Elias. At 23 years old, most people are starting their careers, going out with friends, and falling in love. But for me, life had come to a sudden, crashing halt. My father had passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind a mountain of debt we didn't know existed. My mother was sick and living with my aunt in a different city because we couldn't afford our family home anymore. I was alone in this tiny rented room in a city that didn't care if I lived or died. I remember the first night I sat on that bed. I had exactly $40 in my pocket. I looked at the peeling wallpaper and felt a cold shiver. "How did I get here?" I whispered to the empty air. I had a degree in literature, a passion for writing, and absolutely no practical skills that the world wanted to pay for. I had applied for 50 jobs in 1 week, waiter, clerk, delivery driver, and heard nothing back. The silence in the room was heavy. It felt like it was pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt like a failure. Every time I looked at my phone, I saw photos of my old classmates. They were wearing suits, drinking coffee in bright offices, and traveling to beautiful beaches. I felt a deep, stinging shame. I didn't want anyone to see me like this. So I stopped answering calls. I stopped replying to messages. I locked the door, and I stayed inside. For the first few months, I was in a dark place mentally. I would wake up at noon because I didn't want to face the day. What was the point? There was no work, no money, and no future. I would eat 1 meal a day, usually a bowl of plain rice or a cheap piece of bread, just to make my $40 last. My body became thin, and my eyes became tired. One evening, I was staring at the brick wall outside my window. The sun was setting, and for a brief moment, a single ray of light hit the bricks. It turned the dull red stone into a bright golden color. It was beautiful. In that moment, a thought popped into my head. The wall is still there, but the light changed how it looks. I realized then that I was looking at my life like that dull brick wall. I was focused on the obstacles, the debt, and the loneliness. I wasn't looking for the light. I sat down at my shaky desk and opened a dusty notebook. I wrote one sentence: "I will not let this room be my grave. I will make it my classroom." But how? I had no internet connection, just a very weak signal I could sometimes catch from the cafe downstairs if I sat by the window. I had an old, slow laptop that took 10 minutes to turn on. I had no teachers. "Okay, Elias," I said to myself, my voice sounding strange in the quiet room. "What do you have? You have time. You have a lot of time." I decided to teach myself how to code and build digital businesses. I knew nothing about computers beyond writing essays. I went to the local library every single day because the heat there was free and the books were endless. I would borrow 3 heavy books on programming and carry them back to my room like they were bars of gold. The struggle was real and physical. In the winter, the room was freezing. I would wrap myself in 2 blankets and wear gloves with the fingers cut off so I could type on my laptop. My fingers would ache and my breath would turn into mist in front of my face. I would study for 12 hours a day. I remember a night during the first year when the hunger was so bad I couldn't focus. My stomach felt like it was folding in on itself. I looked at my last $5. I could buy a burger, or I could buy a notebook and a pen to keep practicing my logic problems. I stood in the middle of the room, crying quietly. The shame of being a grown man who couldn't afford a meal was almost too much to bear. But I didn't spend the money on food. I bought the notebook. I chose the future over the present. I told myself, every hour you spend in this room is an investment. You are invisible now, but you are growing in the dark. I didn't know if I was lying to myself or if it was the truth, but I had to believe it. If I didn't believe it, I wouldn't survive the night. The second and third years were the hardest. This is the period I call the Great Loneliness. The novelty of my project had worn off. My muscles were always stiff from sitting at the desk. My skin was pale because I rarely went outside during the day. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I had started picking up tiny freelance jobs online, basic things like data entry or fixing simple website bugs. I was earning maybe $50 a month. It was just enough to pay the rent for the tiny room and buy more rice. I was still poor, still hungry, and still alone. One day, an old friend from college, Mark, managed to find my address. He knocked on the door unexpectedly. I didn't want to open it. I looked at my messy hair and my old, stretched-out sweater. I looked at my tiny room. I felt so small. But he kept knocking. "Elias, I know you're in there, man. Open up." I opened the door just a crack. Mark looked shocked. He was wearing a nice jacket and smelled like expensive cologne. "Elias, what happened to you?" he asked, his eyes wandering around the small space. "We haven't heard from you in 2 years. Everyone thinks you moved to another country or something worse. Why are you living like this?" I looked at the floor. "I'm just working on something, Mark. I'm busy." "Working on what?" he asked, stepping into the room. He looked at my desk, covered in complex diagrams and lines of code. "You're a literature major, Elias. What is all this computer stuff? Come on, man. My uncle's company is hiring. I can get you a job as a junior clerk. It pays well. You can get out of this hole." For a second, I wanted to say yes. I wanted the hot showers, the good food, and the comfortable life. My heart screamed, "Take the job! Stop hurting!" But then I looked at my notebook. I had spent thousands of hours learning. I had mastered languages like Python and JavaScript. I was starting to understand how to build systems that could scale. If I took the job now, I would be giving up right before the finish line. "Thank you, Mark," I said, my voice shaking. "But I can't. I have to finish this." "You're crazy," Mark said, shaking his head. "You're wasting your best years in a box. Look at yourself. You look sick." After he left, I sat on the floor and sobbed. I felt like the biggest fool in the world. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just a crazy man in a small room. That night, I couldn't code. I just lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The thoughts in my head were like sharp needles. You are failing. You are delusional. Nobody cares about your hard work. You are going to die in this room. But the next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. I washed my face with cold water. I sat at the desk. I realized that growth is not a straight line. It is a slow, painful process that happens when no one is watching. I started working on my own project, a software tool for small businesses to manage their inventory more easily. I had seen how much small shop owners struggled with this when I went to the market. I spent the next 18 months building it. I had many technical failures. Sometimes I would write code for weeks only to realize I had made a fundamental mistake. I would have to delete everything and start over. Those were the days I wanted to throw my laptop out the window. I would scream into my pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear me. "Why is it so hard?" I would ask. But then I remembered my mother. I remembered the debt. I remembered the golden light on the brick wall. I realized that the difficulty was the teacher. Every time I failed and fixed it, I became twice as good. I wasn't just building software. I was building a mind. I was building discipline. I was building a version of Elias that could handle any storm. By the end of the 3rd year, I had a working prototype. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. I had no money for marketing, so I used the cafe's internet to send 500 emails to small business owners. I offered them the software for free for 6 months. I got 495 no responses, or worse, no response at all. But 5 people said, "Okay, we'll try it." Those 5 people were my light. I spent every waking hour supporting them. If they had a problem at 3 a.m., I was awake to fix it. I treated them like they were the most important people on earth, because to me, they were. They were the proof that my 3 years in the room weren't a waste. Year 4 arrived. This was the year of the ultimate test. My health started to decline. Because I wasn't eating properly and rarely moved, I developed back pain and constant headaches. My vision was getting blurry from staring at the screen for too long. One day, while walking to the library, I fainted on the sidewalk. I woke up in a public clinic. A doctor looked at me with pity. "You are suffering from extreme exhaustion and malnutrition," she said. "You need to rest. You need to eat. If you keep going like this, your body will give out." I went back to my room and looked at the 4 walls. They felt like they were closing in. I felt trapped. I looked at my software. I had 10 paying customers now, bringing in about $300 a month. It was progress, but it wasn't a big future. It was barely enough to stay alive. I started to experience the wall. It's a moment in every long journey where your mind tells you that you've done enough and it's okay to quit. I would sit at my desk and just stare at the screen for hours, unable to type a single word. The depression returned, darker than before. I started to doubt the very idea of hard work. I saw people on social media getting rich from luck, or from inheritance, or from doing silly things. And here I was, sacrificing my youth, my health, and my social life for a piece of software. I remember a specific Tuesday. It was raining hard. Rainwater started leaking through the ceiling of my room, dripping right onto my bed. I had to move my bed to the center of the room. I sat there, surrounded by buckets catching the water, listening to the plink, plink, plink sound. "I give up," I said aloud. "I'm done." I decided that the next day I would call Mark and ask for that clerk job. I felt a strange sense of relief. The struggle would finally be over. I could sleep in a dry bed. I could eat a steak. I went to sleep that night feeling defeated, but at peace. But that night I had a dream. I dreamed of my father. He didn't say much. He just showed me his hands. My father had been a carpenter. His hands were full of scars, calluses, and dry skin. He had worked in a small shop for 40 years to provide for us. He never complained. He just kept sanding the wood, kept driving the nails, kept building. I woke up at 4 a.m. The rain had stopped. The room was damp and smelled of earth. I looked at my own hands. They were pale and thin, but they were the hands of a builder too. I wasn't building tables. I was building systems. "1 more year," I whispered. "I will give it 5 years. If nothing happens after 5 years, I will quit. But I will not quit on year 4. I changed my strategy. Instead of just working hard, I started working smart. I realized that my software was good, but I was bad at telling people why they needed it. I spent my library time studying marketing and psychology. I learned how to speak to the emotions of business owners. I redesigned the interface of my software. I made it beautiful. I made it simple. I used the simple English I was learning to make my website clear and easy to understand. I also started taking care of my body. I couldn't afford a gym, so I did push-ups on the floor of my room. I did squats. I walked for an hour every evening, even if I was tired. My mind started to clear. The headaches faded. In the middle of the 5th year, something changed. One of my 5 original users, a man who owned a chain of hardware stores, called me. "Elias," he said, "your software saved my business during the tax audit last month. I told a group of my colleagues about it at a conference. They wanted demo." That week I had 20 calls. The week after, 50. The small trickles of money started to turn into a stream. $300 became $1,000. $1,000 became $3,000. I remember the day I saw $5,000 in my bank account. I sat on my thin mattress and stared at the number on my phone. I didn't cheer. I didn't jump. I just started crying. Not because of the money, but because I realized I had survived. The room hadn't broken me. I had broken the room. By the end of the 5th year, my small project had become a legitimate company. I had over 200 active business customers. I was no longer a man in a small room. I was a founder. The transition to the big future was strange. I remember the day I finally moved out of that room. I packed my life into 2 small suitcases. I looked at the desk with the shaky leg. I looked at the brick wall outside the window. I felt a strange sense of sadness. That room had been my enemy, but it had also been my greatest teacher. It had taught me that I didn't need much to be productive. It had taught me that the loudest noises in the world are the thoughts inside your own head. It had taught me that silence is where character is built. I moved into a bright, modern apartment with large windows. The first time I took a hot shower without worrying about the cost of electricity, I stayed under the water for 30 minutes. I ate a meal at a nice restaurant, but I found that I couldn't finish it. My stomach had grown used to small portions, and my mind had grown used to simplicity. I used the money to pay off all of my father's debts. That was the best day of my life. I called the debt collectors one by one and told them the money was on its way. I then went to see my mother. I bought her a small, comfortable house near her sister. When she saw me, she didn't care about the money or the success. She just held my face in her hands and said, "Your eyes look different, Elias. You look like a man who has walked through fire." Today, my company employs 50 people. I have a beautiful office and I am respected in my industry. But I don't wear expensive suits and I don't have a flashy car. I still spend most of my time learning. People often ask me, what is the secret to your success? Is it your intelligence? Is it the technology? I always tell them the same thing. The secret is the room. I tell them about the 5 years of silence. I tell them about the hunger and the cold. Most people want the big future, but they are not willing to endure the small room. They want the result without the process. They want the light without the darkness. The lesson I learned is this: your current situation is not your permanent destination. Whether you are stuck in a job you hate, a tiny apartment you dislike, or a state of mind that feels like a prison, remember that these are the places where you are shaped. Hard work is not just about doing tasks, it is about staying consistent when no one is clapping for you. It is about believing in a version of yourself that doesn't exist yet. If you are struggling right now, please listen to me. Do not look at the whole mountain. Just look at the next step. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But whatever you do, do not stop. The world will try to tell you that you are falling behind. Your friends might be moving faster than you. You might feel invisible. But remember the brick wall. The wall doesn't change, but when the light hits it, it becomes gold. You are the light. Your effort is the light. 5 years might feel like an eternity when you are in the middle of it, but in the story of your life, it is just a chapter. It is the chapter that makes the rest of the book worth reading. I still have that old shaky desk. I moved it into my new expensive office. My employees ask me why I keep such an ugly piece of furniture in such a beautiful room. I tell them, This desk reminds me of who I am. It reminds me that I don't need the world to believe in me as long as I believe in the work I am doing. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself, but be disciplined. Build your future in the dark so that when the light finally finds you, you are ready to shine. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives you the strength to stay in your room a little longer, to work a little harder, and to never, ever give up on your dream. Your big future is waiting for you. Just keep building. Life lesson. Success is not built in public. It is built in the lonely hours of hard work and persistence. The strength of a tree is determined by the depth of its roots, which grow underground where no one can see them. Trust your process, embrace your struggles, and remember that your current small room is preparing you for a big future.